Hey, what up, everybody? It's Scuffy here. We're going to go into some legions today and talk about ourselves the Chaos card pool. Let's get the game set up here. So, Chaos is the last neutral faction that I haven't covered yet, and it's an interesting card pool. Let's go into the cards here. Let's go into collection. And let's take a look at what Chaos has to offer. Now, there's just been recently added a new Chaos Warlord, the captured Mandragorax, which is a Titan from the event, and that was available in the shop for a day. I wasn't sure if it was going to stay available or if they'd bring it back. It's the first legendary Warlord in the shop, so I picked it up. I splurged on a few more crates to break to the 1600, and I picked it up, so that's why I've got it. But just to go a little bit into Chaos, Chaos is, as it's indicated up top, it's a neutral faction. It's one of the three, the Imperial, Mechanicum, and Chaos, which means that it can be used with any of the legions. Which means even the Loyalist legions can also use the Chaos cards. And while some people, purists, might think that that's not thematic, unfortunately, that's the way it is, and there are some cards, as we'll go into here, that are Chaos cards that are useful for a variety of decks. Chaos has some very good utility, some very good random spread damage, and some cards that help combo and help build decks from Sons of Horus to the Raven Guard to Iron Hands. Everybody has got something to benefit and might only include one or two Chaos, or you can go full tilt with Chaos. Results vary. So let's get into it. So here we are, we've got Angathol. Now Angathol was the first and only, for the longest time, Chaos Warlord. It's got a beefy health of 40, which rivals that of the Primarchs. So that is something that it does have going for it. Angathol's ability has been changed around a couple times. Where it's at currently right now is not too bad. It's just that it suffers in that it's not offensive, and the neutral warlords tend to be limited in what they have to their availability, just drawing from neutral factions. So the primary selling point of Angathol is reducing the maintenance of friendly demons by 2, which, if you're running Chaos, that's a lot of your troops, a lot of your good troops have maintenance costs. So reducing it by 2 brings it down for just about all of them to next to nothing, and then the higher ones who have a higher maintenance cost makes it less stifling when you've got it. In addition to that, Angathol has the ability to give a Mark of Chaos to a non-demon troop for 2 energy, which is not bad. If you've got a stealth troop, or you are able to get the Mark of Tzeentch onto a troop early on, you can start building up within the course of 2 to 4 turns. If you don't already have other marks in your hand, you can quickly create yourself a greater demon. So that is something to keep in mind. If anything, it's a random factor. You could put a Mark of Chaos on a troop and get a mark that you aren't going to benefit from, but you never know. That's part of Chaos. That's the way it goes. Capture Mandragorax. It's got a low initiative, which is very unfortunate. Currently, the ability for Mandragorax is a little bit of good and a little bit of bad. The bad part is the relentless part. If you control no Chaos troops, take 1 damage, and that's at the start of your turn, which, as you'll see, there's a variety of Chaos troops that are good. There's a good chunk of them that are not so good, that you wouldn't bother keeping in your deck. Even as a neutral warlord, you'd probably opt for Mechanicum or Imperial troops. And if you're just putting junk troops in your deck to avoid that additional damage, then your deck is going to suffer. On the other hand, when you are late game and you've taken 4 to 5 damage, and maybe you've got from your ability and you've got 1 or 2 health left, it shortens and shrinks the window down that your opponent has to do to you. They could leave you at 1 health, and before you even get a chance to do anything on your turn, you could lose the game because of that ability. So when you are using this warlord currently and you are building your deck, you have to keep that in mind, whether that means you run lots of low-cost troops that aren't Chaos, or you run lots of Chaos troops in general, or additional healing, whatever the case may be. It's something to keep in mind. The low initiative is also a bad part of it. There are only a few warlords with low initiative, and this one happens to have it. However, the upside is his ability is not too shabby, especially early to mid game. 2 damage, dealing 2 damage to 2 random enemies, and it's only going to hit the same enemy once, so it won't hit your opponent's warlord twice for 2. But early on, it's going to slow their ability to get troops onto the board, because for 2 energy you're damaging their warlord, you're going to damage their first troop. Unless they hit 2 to 3 troops onto the table, you're going to damage them for 2 cost, and then that's going to allow you to throw down your troops at a quicker rate. So there is a big upside to that. Like I said, early, mid game, late game may not be so beneficial. If your opponent is playing more tactic heavy and they're not relying on troops onto the table so much, it's not going to have as big as a pull, although you will be doing 2 damage to their warlord every time. And as it's random and it does not target, that means that stealth, like Korax, it gets past. This is a huge ability when you really think about it against the Raven Guard, especially early game. Raven Guard have got a lot of 2 health units, a lot of good 2 health units, so just being able to pick them off at random, or early on, for every turn, it's going to stall their ability to drop cards. It's also going to continue to rack up damage against them. So there's some upside, there's some downside. Time will tell how effective he is. Time will tell if these abilities are changed down the road, but currently that's how he is. So those are the 2 warlords. So going into the Chaos card pool, I'm going to try to run through this fairly quickly. There's a lot of stuff in here that's not worth looking at much, but we're still going to look at it because it's card by card. That's what we do in a card by card. So Escape Vent. This is a newer card from the Istvan 5 expansion, and it's got a lot of uses for 0 cost. So you can use it in any turn. You can give stealth to a friendly infantry or starting troop until your next turn. It won't work on vehicles. That's the one downside to it. However, it will work on, a lot of people use it on Jubok. A lot of people will use it on something that they want to keep in stock for a turn, just to keep alive. If you've got a legendary, if you've got Captain Uji and the Death Guard, just kind of pick and choose those cards that you're dropping that you think your opponent might have a card destruction, or might have a Melgator or some other removal, or just instant direct damage. It keeps that ability going. It's really good in Iron Hands when you think about it. With some of their relentless abilities, they need that turn to get going. Escape Vent gives them a way to almost guarantee that they have that turn. Now, there is anti-stealth in the game. People are playing it because Raven Guard is popular. However, this card makes for a lot of interesting survival options. Wounded Zealot. Oh, let me just go back in really quick. I don't run this right now in my Numian deck, but this works really good with some of those salamanders with Survivor. That usually it's a gamble whether or not they're going to make it through a turn. This gives them that turn that they need in order to survive, so worth mentioning. Wounded Zealot. It's a little bit of a joke. The art's great, but you're not going to use this card. If you've got this card in your deck, you may not have a whole lot of options, or maybe you're running with a Garo build or something, but realistically, just not a good card. Same goes here. You've got 3/1 Berserk, which means at best he's only good for 1 turn. He has 1 health, which means any sort of direct random damage is going to just do him in. His cost is 1, but no, just no. This one's even worse. I don't this is for the same cost with no drawback and no upside. I don't know, just no. Nurglings, here we go. Here's a 1 cost that seems to be decent. They're 1/3, and there's a couple different ways to spawn them in the game. I think actually only one major way to spawn them in the game, but you'll see it with the Horus bot decks occasionally, and you'll see it with some decks that like to spam troops. Here's one with the maintenance of 1, so with Ingathol, that's a maintenance of 0, and As a backlash, it returns to your hand. You will, if once these guys hit the table, you will always have the option to have a Nurglings on board, which might just be 1 damage. But if you've got a Death Guard deck and you're running Captain Luigi and the Wall of Bodies, these guys are perfect because you keep chucking them. They're doing 1 damage. Maybe you're using Durak Rask to finish them off with another 5 damage. You're building up your Wall of Bodies. Luigi is pumping up your health. There's something to consider if you've got the Horus and you're going for his Whispers. These guys are every turn going to get you 1 to 2 cost off of your Whispers. So it's a decent cheap demon if you use it in your build and you're thinking about it correctly. Swarm of Flies. This is another little cheap demon for a 2/2 for 1 energy. It's got maintenance 1, but first turn you can drop this. You could technically drop 2 of these if you happen to have 2 in your hand first turn in your first go. There's not much more upside than the fact that they're unstoppable. They came out post-event. It was a long time. I think it was in beta. They're interesting. I haven't seen them used or abused to some degree, but it's a nice little touch thrown in there. The fact that it's a Nurgle thing. They're little natty, nitsy demons. So your Taint of Chaos here, and there's some further art down below in terms of what the actual Taints of Chaos do, but this is the one that you can include in your deck. That's not generated randomly. The artwork has been updated on the ones that generate randomly now. So for 1 energy, you give yourself a Mark of Chaos. Early on in the game, if you're starting out, you might have these included in there, but as your card pool progresses, you'll find that there's cards that generate your Taints of Chaos. Ingethol gives you a Taint of Chaos. There's just better use of space in your deck. There's no need to include additional ones unless you're just kind of looking for something extra, or you're building around the idea of just throwing down as many Marks of Chaos as possible. But realistically, after you get through maybe to the point where you've got 2 to 3 warlords, you might not need these guys anymore. Sorry, talking, losing my voice. So Fire Cultist 2/1, these guys are kind of a bait. 4/1 attack. They're not going to survive a turn. 9 times out of 10, they're not even going to survive the turn after you put them out. Your opponent's going to have some sort of direct damage, splash damage, throw a troop at them. But if they don't, you're hidden for 4. I wouldn't include them in the deck. I wouldn't think about it. There's just better options. There's no survivability there at all. The Horus Occultists are one that you do see. I actually like this artwork here. I like that style. When they attack a warlord, they add a Taint of Chaos to your hand. Most of the time, you're only going to get 1 attack in. Every now and then, you might be lucky enough to get 2 to 3 attacks if you've got some sort of healing or health buff on them. But this is a card that's generating you a Taint of Chaos. It's doing damage. It's putting something out there. It lends itself, if you are playing with Chaos and you want to have Chaos cards, there you go. If you're playing Horus and you're going for the Whispers, not only does this card reduce your Whispers cost, but the Taint of Chaos that goes into his hand reduces the Whispers cost for 1 energy. That's a cheap reduction. Righteous Zealot is another one that you see early on in the game. You might even see it in some event decks. You might see it in some decks that people put together that's kind of like little jokes or messes. They keep a troop out on the board after they've been killed, but it's a 1/1, so it's not worth much of a punch. But there are some decks right now. Ferrus Manus's change to his Reckoning makes these guys worth considering, because both this and the Wounded Zealot would reduce his cost of his Reckoning. They have a small niche, so, and they're common. So there you go. You should be kind of familiar with Seek and Destroy start of the game. If you can get early game as a new player, I would highly recommend having 2 of these in your deck, at least up until you reach Mars level. And then at that point, your card pool might be a little bit bigger and you've got some more options available to you. But having the ability to dish out 3 damage to an enemy troop is big. It's crucial, especially early to mid game when your opponent's trying to set up certain troops on the board and you need that 3 damage to cap them off, whether it's a 4 health or a 5 health and you've got 2 troops on the table. This card loses its, I won't say it loses its luster. Its luster is always good, but it kind of loses its draw as you get higher up. You've got more card options available to you. There's things that do the same effects or built-in similar effects. It can always be squeezed in, but as time goes on, it's harder to include. It's still a very good card. It's one of the good Chaos common cards, and it's one of the cards that I mentioned earlier in terms of, Chaos having a lot of good variety damage cards. This is one early in the game that you want to have, that you kind of rely on all the time. And as time goes on, you kind of look back at it, and you may or may not use it, but it's a good Chaos card. Shawashan. I've seen her in event decks, and even in event decks, I don't ever use her for her ability, because her ability doesn't let her act again, so she just sits there and gives herself a Mark of Chaos, which just buys your opponent an additional turn to get rid of her. It's a neat little thing. If you're teaming her up with Ingethul to go for some sort of greater demon conversion, you could, not the turn that she comes in, but the turn after she comes in, if she manages to survive, you could slap on, that's technically 2 marks or more on her. You might get her to transform right away. You've got to be building for it. If you're not building for it, then there's no point really in having her and her Davenite cultists in the deck. Breach is new to the game. Breach is new with the expansion, and it's got 2 different variety options, and it's seen a little bit more play. It deals 5 damage to a frontline troop, which will kill 90% of the frontline troops that people play. There's some big beefy health ones, but 5 damage is gonna KO pretty much all those early frontline troops that people are packing, or it deals 2 to any other unit, which includes your opponent's warlord. So it has versatility. And even if you're playing Angron, you can use this on yourself. So I've seen this played in people's Angron's decks, both as offensive and as a way to further get him closer to his whispers. So something to think about. It's a good card. 3 cost is not bad for the variety of damage. It's kind of similar to a crack grenade, except it works on troops and frontline troops as opposed to vehicles and units. Ivlin. Now, Ivlin is a rare early on in the game, and maybe even later on if you're, again, going with a marker deck. For 3 cost, he's a 3/3, which he's still in that fragile death range, but his backlash is really good. It's only good if you've got an additional troop on the table, so usually if you put him out and you don't have anybody else on the table, your opponent's got a free turn to kill him without any really repercussions. Otherwise, they'll normally kill the other troop and then kill Evelyn to avoid that mark going on anybody, because it could range from Mark of Siege to Mark of Corn. So it's nice. It's one that I think I ran in my Karn deck for a little bit until my World Eater pool got bigger. I haven't used him in any sort of Chaos decks anytime soon, but he has use, and if you're playing it right and you're playing that card pool right, he's got a decent ability, so he's not too bad. I don't like these guys. I've seen them in event decks. It's just, no, they don't do anything for you. They can be easily killed on your opponent's turn. Most offensive warlord abilities can kill them, so that without even actually engaging in them, just kind of a waste of space. Screamers are kind of the same. Screamers used to be a little bit better. They used to have 3 health prior to being adjusted. Basically, they're a target unless you've got multiple targets out on table, or you've got some frontline troops. These guys probably won't last a turn. That either means that your opponent is eating 5 and attacking it directly with their warlord, or they're sending out some other troop, or they've got direct damage. If they manage to last a turn and they can sneak attack for 5, that's great. It just doesn't happen as often as it used to, and that's probably for a good thing, to be honest with you. But it is unfortunate that they're an epic rarity, and they're more or less just a target. You kind of distract your opponent. On the plus side, it's a low cost, so it's not like a 4 or 5 cost. It's a low cost. You're throwing it out there, and you're trying to get your opponent to go after that rather than something else that you've got on the table. Now, the Brotherhood, these guys here are actually, I think, a better version of the cultists that we saw earlier here, the Horus occultists. These guys have got the relentless ability, so at the start of your turn, you just get a chain of chaos to your hand. So they don't need to attack. If you can hide them with a Mark of Tzeentch or escape vent, or you can put them behind some frontline troops, you can get yourself several taints of chaos into your hand, which can further your demon endgame, or just in general your offensive options. They're pretty neat, and if you're doing a chaos deck or you're doing a Horus deck, you want those guys in it. They are rare, and if you've got them and you want to try them out, I don't think they're a terrible idea. The Trap is a card that early on in the game is useful, except against drop pod troops. Later on in the game, a lot of people don't use it. You'll see it in events. I'm right now running a deck that does use it, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. It can attack. It's a fortification, and when your opponent plays a troop, it deals 6 damage to it and destroys the trap. That's the Trap. 50-50. Sometimes your opponents will just sack a junk troop to it. It doesn't stop rally effects, so that they can bring in a rally troop and get their rally benefit off. But you are trading this for the troop, and you're kind of forcing their hand in terms of how they play. Now you're making your opponent play to you, or at least change their plan to readjust, and it buys you a turn. So if you're playing a deck that wants to play that way, it's a different style of offense. It's not for every deck, but it's not a bad card at all. It's especially early in the game when you're looking for ways to do damage and keep board presence. It's something worth considering. The cost is fairly balanced, I think. I give it a solid score for that card. I don't know why it's scored. I don't know why to be ranking it, but it's a good score. So Warrior Lodge, I haven't seen this card used. I like the concept of it, especially, again, playing with a deck that is running a bunch of Marks of Chaos or pumping up troops with Marks of Chaos, a Chaos Sons of Horus deck. I just don't see it happening as often. But man, if you could get one going out there, your troops have already got a Mark of Chaos on them, so they're already pumped, and then you're giving them +2, and that's across the board. That's a pretty decent benefit. It's just, I think, a little harder to pull off than some of the other bonuses out there. Now, Artillery Strike is new with the Istvan 5 expansion. I like this a lot. You're seeing a lot of play with it. I think we'll look at defensive satellites here in a little bit, but personally, this one scores higher for me for defensive satellites because you're going to get 2 damage. You still are damaging it to 3 random enemies, but if your opponent, and many opponents, not every opponent, but many opponents usually don't get more than 3 or 4 units on the table, so that means that you're dealing 2 damage to all of their units. If you can control it, or they're under that 3, this deals just like earlier, as we saw here with the Mandragorax. Basically, this is Mandragorax's shooting the Artillery Strike here. This deals with a ton of the Raven Guard options. And, while some people might complain that, they can get their stuff out early, this is a 4 cost. It's very, very possible to get this off just as early and kind of clear out their offensive options. It's a good mass damage card. It doesn't strike as high as defensive satellites, but it's more reliable. And especially in certain decks, you want reliability. You don't want random, because many people attest it's the random factor. Sometimes you score high and you feel great, and there are times where you score low and you just curse the heavens. So having that random factor neutered, I prefer that. I prefer that myself. So Battleflies here, I've seen these out there. occasionally, and I think it might just be because the players don't have a big card pool. The health on these is great, and with Ingathol, that maintenance is 0. Poisonous is not too bad, and they're unstoppable. Offensively, though, with the 2, it's not enough for me to be wanting to include these into a deck, even an Ingathol deck. I think there's better options with a 4 cost, but that 7 health is very nice. So, I mean, if you've got these early on and you don't have a whole lot of good 4-drop options, you may want to consider Battleflies, but I don't think there's really anything that you can kind of build around with these. If Poisonous worked a little bit differently than it does, maybe that'd be different, but it doesn't. Embers of Isfahan 3. This is maybe a better 4-drop in terms of if you're going for the Mark deck as opposed to the Battleflies. Can attack, but it's got a 7 health, and for 0, it's going to give a Mark of Chaos to a non-demon troop. There are better ways to give Marks of Chaos, especially in certain legions like the Emperor's Children. But this one, if you're doing a neutral deck or you're doing a deck that is not one of those legions, is a decent way to give Marks of Chaos to your troop. If your opponent doesn't opt to get rid of this, you have got a free Mark of Chaos every turn. So that's not too shabby. That's not too shabby at all. These guys here, I've seen them in event decks, and that's about it. The offensive is nice with the 5/3, but the 3 health makes them very vulnerable. They're just kind of in that delicate stage, and without any sort of ability, there's better things to go on to. Out of the 4-drop troop options that we just looked at, 3, I would go with this one first before I go with those. But I'd really go for the Telos Changers as like the one. We'll get to the Telos Changers here in just a second. So Possess. Possess is new. I like the idea of it, and I want to see more abilities like it into the game. So this is one that you put on your opponent's troop, and then it deals 2 damage to adjacent units. So if they've got that troop that they're not attacking with, and you throw that on them, it's going to deal 2 damage to whoever they're adjacent to. Usually it's the Warlord, at least for 1 turn. It's really nice when you put it on a fortification and you just don't attack the fortification. You know, like, oh, you like your Embers of Isfahan 3? I won't attack it. I'm giving up that option, but it's going to cost you 2 damage to 2 different units each turn for having it out there. What's another one? There was another one that I thought of early on that is like Wall of Bodies, you know. I mean, as long as you've got unstoppables or a way to get around it, but if you're putting this on something that they can't attack, they're just going to be regretting that they have it on the board. So I like the idea of it. There needs to be more cards like it to make it viable, because just throwing it out there random 9 times out of 10, they'll take 2 damage on a unit and then they'll attack with the card that's got possessed and they'll get rid of it. But if you can stick it around for a little bit, it'd be worth seeing. No, these guys are terrible. They seem like they're really good, but they're not. First off, their cost ability is too high. Yes, they have stealth, but again, as we've discussed, there's a lot of anti-stealth that are out there that people are using. Most importantly is their 2 health. That makes them very susceptible to random damage, splash damage, especially at a 4-cost stage. Artillery Strike takes these guys out before you can actually use them. So they're just not good. And then on top of that, that 5 energy, let's say you get them out on turn 4. Turn 5, all your energy is just getting a random lesser demon. Is it going to be a good trade-off? Probably, but you don't know. You might get one that you can't do anything with, or that isn't going to be as good as you wanted. These guys here, I've seen in event decks as well. I would pass on them. It's nice that they can create a troop. It's just a 2/1 Kabbalist. We've seen it before. It doesn't do anything. And I'm going to pass on these guys too. This is the troop that you want. This is the one. If you've got 1, great. If you've got 2, you can build a deck around these guys. First off, Angathol makes these guys maintenance 0. Again, another great demon unit that's maintenance 0. You don't want to put these guys out at turn 4. If you have them in your hand, you build your hand up. So around turn 7 or 8, you can play this and maybe 2 to 3 other cards if you've got a lot of cheap cost cards in your hand. And then suddenly this guy's down, and then you're dealing 2 to 3 different random damages across the board, which can range from 1 to 3. And I've seen there's actually quite a few decks that can kind of combo this. I've seen an Ornithoph combo it. I've seen Fulgrim combo it. I've seen Tarvitz combo it. Targadon. Garrowgate could do it. I would say Garrowgate, but the revised Garrow who runs cheaper units could do it. It's a great way to just wreak havoc if you time it right, and then your opponent has got to deal with those. If you've got a bigger hand, you've still got cards in your hand the next turn at turn 9 or 10, and you can play 3 or 4 more cards before even attacking. That's fantastic, especially if they don't have anything on the board, because then they're just going to take 3 different attacks of 1 to 3, which could range from 3 to 9 damage, and you're playing cards, so you're getting cards and you're doing damage. Just all-stars. If you're looking at it, if you see them in the shop and you're thinking about it, do it. You got to build a deck around them if you've got them, but you won't regret it. You'll have fun with them. They may only last the turn, but the turn that they've played, if you've played them right and you've played them wisely, they've done their work. So defense satellites, for the longest time, and even now and occasionally, now and then, but for the longest time, defensive satellites was my biggest love and hate card. I liked the concept, I liked the idea. It was a staple, but man, you hate when your opponent wins a game because their satellites just did the damage that it needed to do, and yours didn't. And that is still the case. I think that's always going to be the case. That's part of the random damage factor and element. Early on in the game, as a new player, you want these in your deck because they deal damage across the board to everybody, and it's moderate damage. It can be minimum, but it can be moderate. If they've got a troop with just 1 health on it, you know it's going to get rid of them. That's great. If it's got 4, it's a huge gamble on whether or not it's going to work, but boy, is it nice when it does. I have fond memories of the card. I don't use it as often. Again, like I said, I prefer Artillery Strike. I prefer the reliability, but this still has a lot of potential, so you still see a lot of uses with it. It's not a bad card, especially early in the game. You want those types of cards in your deck. Diryu's Rhino is one of those ones that, just like not Wounded Zealots, but the scroll back up here slowly, apparently. Jeez Louise, why is it so slow? The Righteous Zealot, because he's righteous and then he gets wounded after he gets out of his Rhino. They're good for a certain deck build. This is great in a Ferrous Manus deck right now because just through the course of this card alone, he's reducing his Reckoning by 4 points, and making 4 targets and making it just harder for your opponent, even though they're just 3/1/1 scrubs. Those 3/1/1 scrubs can very easily be pumped with Ferrous Manus, have effects placed on them. So it's a good card in the right deck. Outside of that, it's very overpriced for very little. So if you've got it, you've got to choose how you're going to build your deck, and if not, don't include it. This guy's not a bad 5 cost. As a rally, he gains a Mark of Chaos, and when he gets the mark of Slanesh, or he gets the Mark of Khorne, you're very happy because he's a 4/4, which means he's got a decent amount of health to possibly get 1 to 2 attacks in. If your opponent doesn't have any offensive options, he does have a nice wicked looking sword there too, some good artwork. And it's a rally, so you don't have to blow a Mark of Chaos onto it. Technically, you could get him out here, and if you're playing Ingathol, throw another Mark of Chaos on. Now he's got 2 Marks of Chaos, and maybe they're both Mark of Khorne and Mark of Slanesh. Ooh. So, not bad. Kind of high-priced, but not terrible. Now, C-Rec is a different story. There was we'll go into Barge of the Damned here later. In a second, that's been errated, but there was a big C-Rec deck surge because it was a nice little ability. His backlash is killer when you really, if you're lucky enough to score. First off, as a 5 cost, he's a 4/5. That's actually pretty beefy. That's a 4 attack and that's a 5 health. That's nice. That's good. If you're smart and he is against you, you do not kill him right away if you can avoid it. It means you have to take the 4 hit somehow, some way. Your opponent's going to want to get rid of him as soon as possible because they want that backlash. They want that lesser demon in their hand with a reduced cost. Who doesn't want a cheap demon? Nobody. Especially if you're playing chaos, that must be what you want. You want this. You want the chaos. But if you can draw it out a turn or two, stun him, or throw up a couple walls that he's got to go through before he gets that ability, you're buying yourself some time. Now, if you do have him, you want to get him as quickly as possible. So yes, you'll understand. We'll look at some of the demons that can spawn. Some of them we've already seen. We've already seen Telos Changers and Screamers can be spawned by C-Rec. But it's these ones down the road here. Where are they at? Oh, shit. Pardon my language. I'm just looking at my cards. I'm not even looking at the whole thing. Let's make sure I haven't missed anything. I'm pretty sure I've gotten them all up to this point. Yep. Okay. I skipped Ichiron. We'll get to Ichiron here. These guys are what I'm talking about. These 3. Yeah. That's a C-Rec possibility. You can get that with C-Rec. I don't have Ichiron, so I've never used him, but I wouldn't use him if I had him. Mainly because Ingathal makes his ability very redundant, especially early to mid-game to begin. I mean, he's great with some of the greater demons, but realistically, if you're reducing the cost across the board, you're not going to use him. If you're new to the game and you don't have Ingathal and you want to build chaos, I guess you could think about putting him in there. It's not bad. He's a 5/5, but that's about it. He doesn't do much more beyond that, and if you don't have a whole lot of demons to begin with a maintenance cost, then his ability is worthless. So yeah, I don't have him, and even if I did, I wouldn't run him. Now Kenrick I have seen. I've seen him in bot decks. I've seen him in non-bot decks. You have to time his play right. He's a higher cost late game card, mid to late game depending. But his ability is nice. If you can manage to keep him on the table for a turn, and you've got like maybe an escape vent or something, then you just throw out like a cheap troop, maybe with a rally benefit, or maybe it's one of those righteous zealots. For 1 more energy, you turn it into a random lesser demon. So if your opponent doesn't get rid of this guy, you can start pumping up some demons on your side of the table really fast. And as we'll see, those demons can be pretty potent. So these two, C-Rec and Kenrick, I mean, go hand in hand if you're looking to do demon-y things. Can't go wrong there. 5/6 health, 4/5 health. Yeah. Medale is not one that I have seen. He's too high cost for too little. His ability relies on friendly infantry dying. So he's a demon, and if you're running demons, you may not have as many infantry as you think. And then he gives you a Taint of Chaos, and Taints of Chaos can't be played on demons. So I'm just going to kind of shrug my shoulders. A lot of potential. Ultimately, I think the payoff is just no-go. No-go for me. Teloth. This guy here. People like him. And understandable. At the end of your turn, you add a random tactic to your hand. Now, you could get really good stuff. You could get a Vengeful Spirit or Pride of the Emperor. You could get Escape Vent. It ranges. You could get nothing good, something more like Warrior Lodge, and this is just looking at the chaos stuff. It goes across the board. Any tactic, whatever legion, neutral troop, it doesn't matter what you've got in your deck. You could pull it from a deck that you can't play. You could pull it. It's just random. He's a 6 cost. He's a 6 health. He's a 7 life. He's a Most people don't attack with him until maybe they need him to clear something. They have him sit there for that random tactic. Maintenance 3 is kind of high unless you've got Ingethil on the board, but his potential is high. So not bad. I think he's one of the ones of the greater demons that I like myself personally. Abyssa is one I do not like. I like the idea. It's a 7 cost, and 8/7 is just brutal. I mean, that's huge offensive. And the Battle Honor sounds cool. Put a copy in your hand of the enemy killed. But most of what you're going to be attacking at turn 7, if it survives, you're only going to get 1 troop. Maybe 2 if you play it right and you're timing it. And that goes without saying, and you don't know what you might get. I mean, it could just be frontline infantry. It could be, a bunker. It could be nothing if you're using him to attack your opponent's warlord. So I like the idea. I just don't like him as much as the other ones. Barge of the Damned. So we talked a little bit about this. This card has been revised a couple times. Where it is now, I think, is a better iteration. It's better flavor. You put in play a copy of up to 3 Chaos Infantry troops that died this game. Now, if you play your deck right and you set your deck to have only certain Chaos cards on the table, such as C-Rec and Kenric and a couple of the higher powered cards, Changers, and you play a Barge of the Damned, you could get 3 of them up there. Now it's not going to do 3 copies of one card like it used to. That was originally it was something else, and then they changed it to that, where that was the ability. So your opponent only had to kill 1 C-Rec, and then you could put 3 C-Recs into the game. They changed that. You're only going to get 1 copy unless you play 2 C-Recs, and you might get 2 C-Recs and a third of a different troop. And that doesn't just go with your troops, it goes with your opponent's troops. So if they've thrown out a couple scrubs, that's going to change up the order or the potential in terms of what you might get. However, if you're building with it as a 7 drop, and even if you manage to get a couple cheap demons out early on, that's going to put them back on the table. That's cool. That's nice. And that can give you a lot of options, especially depending on the Chaos Infantry troops that you've got. It's Chaos Infantry now, so it won't even work on the demons. Sorry, Changers. Sorry. But still not bad. Still not bad. You got to build for it, though. You can't just throw that in there as an alt-win condition. And speaking of things not to throw in your deck, no. As a 7 cost, it should be doing more than 3 damage. And then poisoning an enemy troop is you couldn't kill it. And the next turn it still gets to do something before it dies. I just don't like this. There are better 7 cost useless mechanicum cards, in my opinion. If you're starting the game and you don't have anything else, I guess it's okay, but I've never messed with it. I looked at it and thought to see if it had potential, and it just doesn't. Sofapok, I think that's how you say it. He's been changed, and a lot of people felt that his change made him worthless. He's not quite so worthless, but he won't 9 times out of 10 last the turn to be able to use him. His maintenance 4 is huge. That's a huge maintenance, even with Ingethil, because at turn 7, you're running down to turn 6. Basically, you're losing a turn by playing him with Ingethil, and if you're not, you're going to lose 4 turns. His ability, if he sticks, is almost as good. I think. First off, you've got to use the 0. I think it used to be a relentless ability, or at the end of your turn, but now you've got to use his ability for 0. So you can't use him to attack, to use his ability to get a random tactic. Now your next tactic costs 0. That doesn't mean the one that you generated. That could include ones that are in your hand. That's decent, even if you don't have any tactics in your hand. The one that you pull will be 0, or if you've got a Vengeful Spirit in your hand, even with his maintenance, you can hit the 0, get a random tactic, and still drop your Vengeful Spirit for free. So he plays differently. He still has use, but it's not as simple as he once was. I still like Teloth over Self-Poke. I don't know how you pronounce it. It's chaos. You're not supposed to pronounce any of these. I like Teloth better, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't have variety. I don't know if I had to choose between the two. I'd go with Teloth. Possessed Basilisk. Now, here's one that does 6 damage for 1 damage more as opposed to this little bile cannon. So this is kind of like your rare version of the bile cannon. It's a Possessed Basilisk. That's a little bit better. And he's got a battle honor. So if he kills it, now that's by attacking, not with his ability. Keep that in mind. So he's got to use that for attack, but he's got 9 health, which is beefy. You can get yourself a Taint of Chaos. So he can both crush troops, or he can just straight deal 6 damage to your opponent's warlord. That's not bad. It's a high cost. You don't see too many of them. Again, it's a vehicle. So if you're looking for a closer and you don't have too many options, he's not bad. Normally you're not going to go with him, but if he does manage to stick around for a turn, they haven't destroyed him, he can deal some decent damage. Now, Uriah the Seducer is annoying. Let me tell you that. It's annoying. He just drops your opponent's warlord to 0 attack. I don't have Angron, but if I was an Angron player and my opponent played Uriah the Seducer, I would be very mad, and I would hope that I would have Conqueror or some other of their card destruction, or Melgator to bounce this guy, because Angron with a 0 attack is a sad Angron. He's a sad Angron. And on top of this, guy's got a 7/9. So he can just attack your warlord. Your warlord's got 0 attack. He's not going to do any damage. He's going to take 7 on the next turn. I wish I had this guy. Probably. It's a close call, but he's probably the greater demon that I like the most, because that's just devastating, and it sucks when you have it played against you and you're like, oh, I hope I can do something about that. Father Decay has been changed. This is 14 health, is almost the highest health in the game. We'll see one more for a troop that beats out Father Decay. His maintenance is high, but if you're Angathol, your maintenance is low, and his ability is very neat. It's been changed, and it's been made much better. For 2 energy, he's put in a random troop that died this game, and he can do it again. So, let's say it's turn 10, and you're Angathol, so the ideal situation, you've got 8 energy. You can use his ability 4 times. You're going to get 4 troops for 8 energy, which, depending on what you get, could be amazing, because that includes what your opponent had played. If their stuff has died, you could get their troops on the table, and then he can still attack. And he's got 14 health, and he's doing 6 damage. That's really good. That's really good. His potential is extremely high. He's much more useful than he used to be. I think he used to be, if I remember correctly, it was like you used his ability, and then he just pulled one into your hand. I don't even think he put one into play, if I remember correctly. It wasn't great. Or maybe he put one into play, but it was just one, so he couldn't even attack. This is summoning the undead army right here with this guy. If you manage to have him, he's a good end game. If your opponent can't get rid of him right away, the next turn you can fill your own board with zombies of all sorts and be happy about it. Pax Chaotica is another way to get random lesser demons. It comes at the cost, if you have troops, to destroy all your troops. That's not a requirement. So if you have 0 troops on board at turn 9, you can still play this with no downside and get 3 random lesser demons. And the demons range in what you can get. I mean, you're not going to get these guys if they're greater demons. See where it says greater demon? Uriah the Seducer, greater demon? That's kind of how you know. You're not going to get those guys. But you are going to get the potential to get. I don't think this guy's a greater. He's just a demonic dark priest. You are going to get these guys. They're just demons. They don't have greater in them. Oh yeah, he's lesser. You give him a Dale. You get your Terror Hounds. Look at that guy. It's random. You don't know what you're going to get, but it's not a bad endgame closer. If you're playing Chaos Heavy, or you just want to have that random factor and kind of bank on it as a 9, it's not bad. It's a 1 of, maybe to include in your deck. Slayer of Worlds. Now this card used to be, for me, like a joke if he got it, because it was like, oh, his ability has been changed. His ability initially, I think, was when a troop dies this turn, you have to reduce his cost by 1, so you need to kill like 5 troops in order to get him to be a 10 cost. His maintenance is off the charts at 7, but his ability now, his text has been changed. So if you have him in your starting hand, don't ditch him. Hang on to him, and as the game goes on, his cost is just going to drop and drop and drop, and by turn 6 or 7, he could be a cost 6 or 7, depending on your deck, depending on what your opponent's thrown out at you. You bring this guy in before turn 10, and your opponent will freak. If they don't have a card destruction or a Melgator, that could be it. The 15, the highest health, highest attack in the game. This is the Slayer of Worlds. Finally, he might be playable. Every now and then, you see pictures of people running him. I've not yet seen him played against me. I used to see him as a result of 4 Marks of Chaos, and then you would just destroy him. Like, good job, you got your demon, and I win. And but you felt good for them, even though you felt better getting rid of the demon. But now he actually has potential. So, but that maintenance is beefy. That maintenance is the trade-off, because if the next turn you're probably only going to be able to play 1 card at best to support him. So then let's look at these are the randomly generated cards. So this is just the Mark of Corn. This is what the Mark of Corn does. It gives you +3, +0. It's a nice little buff. It's always a good one to have. Mark of Nurgle, probably the most useless in my opinion. And I know some people like Poisonous, but if they throw that out there looking to get some sort of offensive advantage and they get Poisonous, it's kind of a sad thing, because it doesn't do anything until the end of my turn. So if you don't kill my troop, I still get to do something with it before it dies. So this, I would like to see this changed from give Poisonous to give Poisonous and +0/+2, or just even +0/+3. Beef up the health. Nurgle is kind of a hardy guy. I would like to see this improved. Mark of Slanesh is a nice one to have, as it gives sneak attack, and sneak attack means that you're not taking damage and that troop's staying on the table, and they've got to come to it with their face to get rid of it. I like Mark of Slanesh, and I like Mark of Corn the most. It depends on what troop you're putting it on, but those two are just fantastic. Mark of Tzeentch is decent. It gives unstoppable, and it gives them stealth. It just sucks when you put it on a troop that you don't want or doesn't need unstoppable or stealth. But if you can manage to get this one on a troop first, and you happen to have additional Mark of Chaos in your hand, or the ability to get Mark of Chaos, you have a troop that might not be a target for a little bit, and then all of a sudden you can throw 3 more marks on them, and then you get yourself a greater demon. So it has its uses. It's not as useless as Mark of Nurgle, in my opinion. I would probably rank this. I'd probably rank number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. That's how I'd rank them. So let's look at the random demons that can be generated, the lesser demons here. You've got Terror Hounds, Frontline, 5/3, Berserk. It's a 3 health, so they can be easily disposed. And they're Berserk, so they're not going to stick around more than maybe 2 turns to begin with. But they're a 5/3, and they're a Frontline for a 5 attack, which is pretty stellar. That's a pretty high attack for a Frontline outside of Mechanicum. So if you get these guys on the table, they're nicely offensive. Now, Seducers, I think, are the best ones, in my opinion, you want, because they have fast. So if you get them out, you can use them right away. They've got a 5 attack as well. They've got a 4 health, and their battle honor gives them stealth. So if you're not killing your opponent's warlord with the 5 attack, you could kill their troops. You could put them into stealth and use them again on your next turn. Their maintenance 2 is not too shabby. I like seeing these guys on the table most, and I'm not just looking at the picture. I'm not really looking at the picture to be honest with you. I know what it intends, because I know what Slaanesh is all about, but realistically, I like just seeing them because I know that I can use them right away. Now, Ravagers of Khorne is a scary one. You get them out there, they've got a 6/6, so they're beefy, and they've got Rage +2/0 and Berserk. So if your opponent can't get rid of these guys, or they make the mistake of trying to get rid of these guys and not finishing them off, you could quickly end up with an 8/4 or a 10/2 or less, but still a 10 attack coming at you. Nobody likes that. Nobody likes that. And only a maintenance 2. So, again, not collectible, as is indicated up on the screen. None of these 3 are. But when you see them in game, you feel good about yourself. You feel as if you've worshipped chaos properly. You've reaped the right rewards. You've gotten chaos. And you've brought it. You've brought the terror from the warp to the table. So, that is the card by card for the Chaos factions. That's all of them at this time. Again, it ranges. There's some really worthless ones, and there's some really nice ones, and they fit in a variety of decks. The demons are almost always useful, whether you like to admit it or not. Ferrus Manus can make good use of some of these troops in the Iron Hands. Whether you like to admit it or not, the possibility of putting Survivor on the Slayer of Worlds, because he's not a vehicle. That's just mean. That's just mean. I mean, you could do it with certain cards. It's not just whether you want to admit it or not. Following up a sentence deck with more Datham and then throwing Telos Changers out and then just wrecking havoc on the table, that's just a mean combo. It may not work thematically, but Chaos is a neutral faction. They go with everything right now. You don't know whose side is who's on. Who are they on? Are they on our side? I don't know. Artillery strike, defensive satellites, seek and destroy, breach, those are good for everybody. Those are good for everybody. There's just chaos and damage and explosions. Look at that. The trap explosion. Boom. Shablam. So don't pish posh chaos. Anyways, that's it. That's all I've got for you right now. Thanks for watching. Keep playing Legions. Next time I'll be coming at you. I'll probably be talking about some other card by card. Let's see what's the next Legion in order here. Looks like we're going to World Leaders. That's coming up next. So thank you, everybody. Keep playing Legions and have fun. All right. Bye.